Hello, everyone. Welcome to the episode 6 of the Switch webinar series. Really great to have you guys join us on a Friday afternoon or Friday morning, wherever you're joining from. So just a bit of an introduction. I'm Adam. I'm the Chief Products Officer at Switch. I'm joined also with me is my colleague Stuart, who is our Chief Commercial Officer. Hello, Stuart. And also Mark, who is our founder and CEO. Hello, Mark.
Hello, everyone. Where's that?
Always a few technical things. Okay, just before we get started, it would be great if you could interact with us. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a comment section. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're joining from today and whereabouts you are. So feel free to interact with us on the comment section on the right-hand side. We will also have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, which will last about 15-20 minutes. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll also see a comment section. So at any point you have a question or a comment you want to add, just ask us a question. You can also vote for your most preferred question, and at the end, we'll go through those questions and have a good discussion. So at any point through the webinar, just feel free to raise on there. So Today's webinar is more focused around partnerships. So how do Switch engage with partnerships and also the benefits? But before we get started, I'd love to understand exactly what part of the industry you're joining from. Are you a charger OEM? Are you a charging station manufacturer? Are you a CPO? So Ben, who is working behind the scenes, will put up our poll at the moment. And if you could just take 30 seconds to answer the poll and we'll get started. Cool, I think that poll's up. Okay, got a couple of people voting. Hello, Andrew, who's just said hello. Good to see you. Okay. Okay, so we've got a mix between just charger OEMs, which is great because we've got a big part of our presentation on manufacturers, which is good. And an other, which we will never know. But okay, so we'll let that. We've got one car OEM, mobility service provider. Okay, great. So it's really good to have a mix of an audience because the key areas of the presentation today will be focusing on how we partner with charging station manufacturers and also installers. But having a wide range of collaborators in the industry is really important. So it's really great that you've taken the time to join the webinar today. So we'll get started. Okay, Ben, if you could give us the next slide, that'd be really good. Next one after that. Okay, great. So Switch partners with a number of charging station manufacturers. And what we're going to talk about today is how do we partner with the likes of charging station manufacturers, the process, but also the benefits that we can provide to both installers and charging station manufacturers with our kind of end goal. Now, if anyone has not interacted with us before, Switch is all around enabling and value generating the next generation of EV charging. So we're very much focused around enabling a better, more succinct and more value generated generation of EV charging. And we do that through the protocols of OCPP 2.0.1 and ISO 15118. Now, we work with charging station manufacturers to enable them to be compliant against these latest standards because we see charging station manufacturers as enablers in the industry. The more charging station manufacturers who have OCPP 2.0.1, the better choice there is in the industry for the charge point operators to really benefit from the value-added services such as plug and charge, V2X, and advanced security, which we'll touch on in a little bit more detail when we go into a more detailed product demonstration in the next part of the webinar. Now, charging station manufacturers are a key partnership for us because we want to ensure that there is a huge array of 2.0.1 chargers out there. And how we do that was with our embedded software solution, Joseph. So Joseph is Switch's embedded software solution, which combines both OCPP 2.0.1 and ISO 15118 into one embedded software solution. And we work with both AC and DC OEM charger OEM partners to enable them to be OCPP 2.01 compliant and with 15118. And how we do this is we understand that charging station manufacturers have a huge array of different reasons why they want to move over to 2.0.1. But the end goal really is, it's not a if, it's certainly just a when. And we start the process off with sitting down with the charging station manufacturer and understanding what are they looking to get out of 2.0.1 and 15118. And we work with them on a technical scope, which will include the key benefits that are looking to raise out of 2.0.1, how we will work with them, and also how we integrate with them in the future. So we start off with the technical scoping. And this is really important because we really want to lay a solid foundation in the partnership between the Switch technical team and also the charger OEM's technical team. And how we do this is we interact on a regular basis with agreed certain scope so we can do a full integration. Now, we try to make this seamless as possible. We understand that, different charging station manufacturers have different ways in interacting with the hardware. But we make this as seamless as possible by having an embedded software solution in one central code repository, which is easily accessible for charger OEMs to onboard that onto their charging stations. But we know that sometimes charging station manufacturers have different levels of hardware. So it's really important that we interact and integrate directly with the charging station manufacturer themselves on a regular basis throughout the partnership. So Switch will not leave you alone until we've done the full implementation, but we'll start with the technical scoping so you can really understand what it is to work with Switch. If you go on to the next slide, please, Ben. Okay, so that's the side around how we actually interact with charging station manufacturers. But the end goal is, what's the benefit? So Switch ensures that we can enable charging station manufacturers to be competitive. The key capabilities that you can get natively from OCPP 2.0.1 and ISO 15118, such as plug and charge, V2X, advanced security, these are key capabilities that charge point operators and drivers are expecting now and will be in the future. So we enable charging station manufacturers to be competitive in the value that they can pass on to their end customers. So ensuring we can do that is really important. The end goal is that a charging station manufacturer has a Switch operating system operating on their charging station and has the advanced capabilities that they can then go to market and pass on to their end users and their charge point operators. And what this does is enable you to be Switch certified. So once we've completed the implementation with charging station manufacturers, we will ensure that you're certified. That gives you the green tick, and that enables you then to go to market, take your charger to market, and pass those benefits on to charge point operators. And all of a sudden, you are more competitive in your product offering. The additional benefit is we make it seamless. To anybody you interact with as a customer, so they could be charge point operators, an example, we make the onboarding process really straightforward. So you can onboard your charger onto the platform and ensure it's actively seen and is relatively seamless. The third thing is the level of granularity and the insight that we can provide through data into the charging station. So today we know that the level of engagement and charge on charging stations is relatively low compared to where it will be in the future. So by interacting with Switch and having the Switch operating system Joseph on your charging station, we can provide you with an additional level of data around how your charging station is performing in the field, right down to a really granular component level. So all of a sudden, you now have additional level of insight into how your charger is performing, and also the improving the relationship between you and your CPO. Now, we'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a second, once we touch on the installer segment in a product demonstration. But I just wanted to highlight some of the key benefits that you ultimately will have as charging station manufacturers by partnering with Switch. So just to sum up on the charging station manufacturer side, we will work with you to embed our software onto your solution. We will understand exactly what you want to get out of the 2.0.1 benefits, and we will make you more competitive in your own go-to-market strategy so you can pass on value-added services to both drivers and charge point operators through the embedded software solution, Joseph. Okay, so the next stage we'll be talking around is how we partner with installers, which are a key go-to-market strategy for both of us. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Stuart for a little bit more information. Over to you, Stuart.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at Switch. My name is Stuart McKee. So the reason why we want to partner with installers is because we genuinely add a lot of value to the user proposition that installers make to their customers. And this is principally because the Switch charging management platform is fully native to those important areas of charging capability, such as plug and charge, vehicle to grid, and advanced uptime diagnostics, and not least also transactional security. So these are all very important factors that are going to define the future of EV charging. We're just the platform. So we sit at the center of this value-added ecosystem. But the simple truth is that nothing in our EV landscape happens without the installer. So it's really important for us, obviously, to go to market with installers. So that's what we mean in terms of partnership. We add a lot of value to the installer's conversation with the customers, and I think there's in many ways there's a new breed of installer emerging, one that is looking to elevate their own business in the sense of becoming a CPO themselves and managing their own customers' networks independently. And obviously the Switch platform puts them in a very good space competitively because they can offer a lot more and therefore can achieve more recurring revenues. So this is what we mean by going to market with installers or partnership, in fact. So what does a partnership actually look like? Well, a big part of it is the value proposition that we enable installers to offer to their customers. And it's probably the case that Switch is the most recognized platform, maybe even globally, for understanding the capabilities that can come out of a 15.11.8 implementation. And the first and the most obvious one of these is plug and charge. Plug and charge is probably the most significant advancement in, I would say, the early history of the EV charging landscape. And once people have used plug and charge, it's unlikely they'll want to go back to conventional authentication methods such as RFID or tokens. So it's a real game-changing moment in the industry. Now, the Switch platform can show you the entire plug and charge conversation that goes on between the vehicle and the charger, the 15.11.8 conversation. And to use an old adage, if you can't see it, you can't manage it. And ostensibly, the plug and charge conversation is invisible because it's just happening through the power line between the vehicle and the charger. It's only on a platform that's able to operate or communicate using OCPP 2.01 that you are actually going to see this conversation. So this is the only way you can actually manage plug and charge. You might be able to make it happen on a previous protocol, but you certainly can't manage it, which is the critical issue. This is a massive value add in terms of the installer's conversation with potential customers. In addition to this, a little bit further down the line, the same understanding of the 15.11.8 protocol allows us to deliver bidirectional power transfer. So vehicle to building, vehicle to load, and eventually vehicle to grid. And the conversation, obviously, the installation company has with the customer is, largely about how future-proof is this platform. How future-proof is the installation that we're investing in. And the very best advice the installer can give is to say, well, providing you're based on a 2.01 platform like Switch, then future-proof is not really a topic you need to worry about because this gives functionality way into the future. So obviously this puts the installer in a very strong position, competitively speaking. Other aspects of the value add for the installation company are the granular level of diagnostics that are available on the Switch platform. I won't go into this too much because I know Adam's going to do a demonstration later on and he's going to show you how this actually works. But it takes the maintenance of chargers into the realms of advanced predictive maintenance. So whereby we're stopping a problem before it becomes a customer fail and massively reducing cost and downtime. But I'll let Adam explain a little bit about that later. And then finally, a big factor as we scale the networks will be transactional security. And the 2.01 protocol obviously manages this in the most secure way possible. It's a long way from 1.6 level security. Technically it's banking grade security. So obviously as the networks scale, this is going to become increasingly important. And again, this is a value add that installers are able to relate to customers. Customers will come to installers that can offer all of these value adds. I mean, that's the basic proposition here. That's why, as I say, we're looking for partnership. So what else do you get? Well, there's obviously an element of training involved in this partnership, and we're happy to do this in our HQ in London. We can hold training days, we can give you certification to take the Switch platform to your customers. We can also provide marketing support and, in fact, leads. We have an awful lot of inquiries coming into the Switch office. We genuinely have more leads than we have installation companies. I mean, it's a fact that we're getting used to. So we can share a lot of new business opportunities. We also provide a fantastic backup. We've got a great team here in London and also in Munich and Paris, and a growing presence in San Diego through our relationship with Nuvve. So as we move into this next generation of EV charger experience, it's a landscape that's more sophisticated, it's more technically challenging, and I think this is a moment when you might want to lean on the Switch team, so it's there when you need it. So when is all this going to happen? Well, the platform it goes live in Q1 in 2023, but in actual fact, it's already live. We're working with a number of early stage customers in a sort of beta testing phase, both direct clients and also installation partners. We have quite a big project in the apartment residential parking space. So between now and the end of the year, obviously, we'd like to put the partnerships in place with installation companies. Throughout next year, we anticipate that the level of and sophistication of functionalities on the platform will grow. I don't know whether it's a big secret, but I think it's starting to emerge that we're involved in some fairly significant V2G trials next year. I can't say too much about them, but they involve major vehicle OEMs in the Netherlands and Germany. Some thousands of homes taking on a V2G trial. So a lot of these technologies and user experiences are a lot closer than anyone thinks. So there'll be a lot happening next year, and it's certainly a space to watch. I want to say a little thing about pricing. I mean, not normally, at a launch you'd announce your pricing at the launch because obviously it's a sort of competitive sensitivity. But we've looked very hard at the pricing models that have been used over the past few years by competitors, and we find them incredibly confusing. And if we find them confusing, then who knows how confusing customers find them. I mean, they're really quite out of date in many respects. So we've kind of re-engineered the pricing model, and we've made it simple. We've made it so that end customers can understand what they will pay for. We've taken away upfront onboarding costs and training costs. In actual fact, you don't need training with the Switch platform. So that it's pretty intuitive. You'll recognize it. You'll understand how to use it just by looking at it. So we've taken away all of that aspect of charge point management. We've taken away the escalating monthly license fees that we see with a lot of competitors. We've taken away usage royalties in terms of percentage of energy cost, etc. We don't have any hidden SIM costs or any additional costs. We've gone for absolute transparency and simplicity. So we'll give you more detail about the price at launch, but just to say that they will range from around £10 per socket per month for a simple level 2 charger, through to around £25 per month per connector for a high power charger in a fully public setting with multiple users, etc. So it depends on the charging setting, but it will be absolutely transparent, and you'll have no difficulty at all in explaining to customers how much they would be expected to be paying. And obviously installers will uplift this according to their margins and customer relationships. So we're obviously going to make a big start in January, but we're not going to take over the entire world in 2023. But we will have a strong focus on the UK, the major EU markets, the Nordics, and also the US. We've in some ways we've actually managed a lot more traction in the US than we have in the UK, but that's just the way things have worked out. So any installation companies who are interested in the latest developments in platform technology in those markets, we'd really love to hear from you. I think just a final word. Switch is a relatively young business. In fact, it's not even 3 years old really, but in some sense, it's been around for quite a long time. In fact, 10 or 12 years. And through the work of the Switch founder and current CEO, Mark, who's on this call, we're pretty much recognized as the global leader, the global go-to advocate on ISO 15118 capabilities. So this is obviously the plug and charge, the bidirectional charging, etc. We have an enormous amount of inbound interest in the business simply because we are thought leaders in this space. So it's probably not so unusual that we might want to build an OCPP 2.01 platform that can actually support all of those sophisticated capabilities. And that's basically what we've done. So there's probably not a better partner in the world that can work with you through the next generation of EV charging technology. And I would just say, finally, we're very confident in what we're bringing out in January. We're not looking for exclusivity. We just plan to be better, and we're quite happy to compete for your customers alongside other platform choices that you might make. So we've, in many ways, taken away as many of the reasons as possible that you might have for not wanting to try the Switch platform. And that's it, really. We're not looking to be exclusive. We're just looking to be better. And that's probably the strongest thing I can leave you with.
Okay. Thank you, Stuart. So I think that leads us quite nicely, I think, into a platform demonstration. So I think what we spoke about is, how do we enable charging station manufacturers to be 2.0.1 compliant, and how Stuart has perfectly put, how do we work with installers and charge point operators today so they can visualize and see those benefits. What I'm going to show you now is exactly what Stuart has mentioned, part of the platform which we will be bringing to market in Q1 of next year, but also a little bit of a sneak peek into the key capabilities that are native to 2.0.1 and ISO 15118 in terms of the benefits that you can see. So I'm just going to share my screen. Give me a second. Okay. Stuart, I'm just going to ask you to confirm that you can see that on your screen.
Since we switched 001.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is a key part of the Switch platform, which is called Advanced Diagnostics, which is focused around maximizing the uptime of a particular charging station or charging station network. Now, one of the problems or challenges that we're addressing at Switch is to do with cost. You know that investment in EV infrastructure, particularly for emerging CPOs, anyone that is basically becoming a CPO by default because they need to provide a level of local infrastructure to support residents, workplaces, or is always a key part of their strategic business model to provide EV infrastructure through public charging infrastructure. Regardless of that, we know that it's costly. So being able to maximize the uptime of charging stations at any given time is really important. So you can consistently be able to generate value back from your network. Now, what we designed is a feature called Advanced Diagnostics, which is taking key parts of the OCPP 2.0.1 and ISO 15118 standard and protocol, and bringing that into the Switch platform and visualizing that in a way that actually makes sense for a user to address the issue of cost. So what we're looking at here is essentially one charging station which is currently onboarded onto the Switch platform. And what happens when a charging station connects to the Switch? It unpacks all of its component and performance related history into one place. And what we've done here is visualize that in a way that makes sense for a charge point operator to do certain actions on the back of that, so they can ensure that they're actively managing it. So think of it as like an MRI scanner over a charging station. On an older protocol, you wouldn't really be able to see a level of granularity. On the latest protocol, using the Switch platform, you can see everything, which means that ultimately you can manage everything within the platform. So on the left-hand side here, we can see that this charging station has got 2 EVSEs and 3 connectors. Now, in this particular situation, right now, everything is green on the right-hand side, which indicates that everything is working. We're going to touch on a failure point in a minute, which we've mocked up for this demonstration. But ultimately, what we can see is the status of each EVSE and connector. And this is something that's only possible through the latest technology and protocol within the Switch platform. Now, if we just move over to the right-hand side, what we're showcasing here is a component level of information within that charging station itself. So we can see all of the core components that make up the charging station at any given time. So we can see right now that all of these, apart from one, are currently green and therefore fully operational components. But for the purposes of this demonstration, what we've done is basically error stated one of those components, which we can see here. Now, if we take this into a situation whereby I'm a charge point operator, I'm managing a network of 50 charging stations on the Switch platform, I want to maximize the uptime of those charging stations at any given time. Now, if one of those components was to fail, or one of those charging stations was to fail, I would receive a notification. I would open up that notification, I'd come into the Switch platform, and I would see an additional level of maintenance and diagnostics, which is ultimately what we're seeing here. And I would be able to see exactly what's causing that issue. Now, in this situation, I can see that all of the components are working and therefore green, but this particular component is red, the air cooling system, and I can click down and I can see an additional level of diagnostics. And I can also see all the parameters that make up that particular component, like the fan speed, as an example. Now, I can see this current fan speed here potentially is not exactly where it should be, which then would indicate an issue with cooling. I can then pass on that information directly to an engineer. They can have all that information up front without having to do some physical diagnostics on the charging station, and they can come and address the issue and bring that charging station back up and running, so then there's no fault has occurred. So what we've done there is removed the initial diagnostic cost that you would have as an engineer for the charge point operator, and basically put it up and running, got the charging station back up and running before it's become an issue for the customer. Because we can see everything at a component level of information, which is something you can't do on legacy CSMSs, you can only do it within the Switch platform. We can ultimately then move into the realms of predictive maintenance. So right now, what you see is very much a reactive view. Component fails, I get a notification, I have the information within the Switch platform to address it, I get the charging station back up and running. But what we want to do eventually is remove that issue before it's even occurred for a driver or a charge point operator. And because we can see everything at a component level on the right-hand side here, we can determine over time the failure rate of that particular component. So we can essentially what we call predictive maintenance. So we can predict the issue before it's actually occurred. So we can say, right, my air cooling system is okay now, but actually in 3 months' time, it might not really be working the way it should do. And therefore, I'm going to pass that on to an engineer on the next maintenance visit and tell them within a maintenance report that you can pull from the Switch platform that address these particular components on this charging station before it becomes an issue. So what we've done here is essentially opened up a whole new level of granularity for the charging station diagnostics and management that's of both benefit to an installer because you can see the level of granularity without actually having to visit the site. So you can see all of that remotely, but also for the charge point operator because being able to maximize the uptime of a charging station at any given time ensures that you've consistently been able to generate revenue back and maximize your return of investment against your network. So job done. So we're removing the diagnostic costs. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you is what we call the message logs. So what we're seeing here in the middle of the screen is essentially the communication between the car and the charging station through the ISO 15118 standard. So here we see a mix of both OCPP 2.0.1 messages and ISO 15118 messages. So anything in green here indicates essentially an ISO 15118 message and all the code dialog within it. And we can see the cascade of message logs all the way through from the transaction, which we did previously to this webinar, from the point of which you plug it in. So this is called the plug and charge transaction. So I'm just going to go into this particular transaction view now. So here we can see a plug and charge transaction, which from a driver perspective and ordinarily from a charge point operator perspective is a relatively invisible thing. So, I would rock up with my Porsche Taycan, I would plug in, I would charge, and then I would drive away without having to do any payment at that particular charging terminal. It's relatively invisible for the driver. But what we're providing here is the operational capability for a CPO to see exactly what's happening through the charging cable. So here we can see all of the messages, both on ISO 15118 and OCPP 2.0.1 that occur through a plug and charge transaction. And the main benefit here that is if a transaction was not to happen or wouldn't work, the first point of call for a driver would be the charge point operator. And the charge point operator can go straight into here and understand exactly what's happening. Is it an issue on the charging station through OCPP 2.0.1, or is it an issue on the car? If it's on the charging station, I can see exactly what I need to do to fix it through the messages that you can see, and therefore I'm going to address that. And I know that it's within my remit to address that and fix it. But actually, if it's on the car side, then you can pass that information back to the driver of the car and say, it's a problem with your car. This is something you need to address, and this is the issue that you need to resolve directly with your car OEM. Now, obviously, there is a benefit in data here because you can see everything that's happening within the car OEM as well. But the main benefit here is understanding exactly what's occurring in terms of error state. Is it on the car or is it on the charging station? So this is a relatively technical view. As you can see, these are the core message logs, and you can see all of the code dialog as an additional level of granularity to see exactly what's happening at each message. You can see all of the code dialog that occurs within that particular message. We do recognize that not all CPOs in the future will be technical and won't have a technical grasp of exactly what's happening. So we do have a simplified view of this as well, which means that anyone who is relatively non-technical in the CPO world will be able to really realistically understand exactly what's happening at a more summarized view as opposed to a granular view. But the whole idea here is we provide additional level of granularity into the Switch platform, which has never really been seen before. So you can do additional level of diagnostics, both on plug and charge and on the charging station itself as well. So this view can also be seen at a full charging station level, which we saw on the previous page. But what you're seeing here is on a per transaction level. So you can see all of the messages that have occurred exactly between the car and the charger on a transaction level through a demonstration we did during the webinar itself, so you can see the timestamp as well. This level of information is really important because today you won't be able to see it, and being able to give the operational capability for CPOs to manage this information is really important, because the more cars that come to market that are plug and charge enabled, the likely occurrence this is going to be against your network. The more expectation there is or will be for drivers to have this level of capability within the charging station network itself. And that's where the relationship and the partnership that we have with charging station manufacturers is really important, because the starting point for this is having a charging station that ultimately is plug and charge enabled through both ISO 15118 and 2.0.1, which can occur through the Switch Joseph product. So we enable charging station manufacturers to have the plug and charge capability. And this is where ultimately that benefit is then realized and visualized on the charging point operator side, because you can ultimately see everything and manage everything operationally within the platform. So this is where we see those two partnerships coming together to really see exactly what value you can add to your end customer by partnering with Switch on the Joseph side, but also by partnering with Switch on the platform side, so you can essentially see the benefits. So that's kind of a nice kind of lean in between the two different partnerships we have and the end goal it has as well. Okay, so that was just a small part of the platform I wanted to show you. As Stuart said, we are bringing this platform to market in Q1 of next year. We have some small beta testers, which is obviously what you can see right now. We'll be able to have a full demonstration of this for anyone who wants to see the entire platform directly. Just feel free to get in contact with us. But this is some of the key capabilities that you can do through 2.0.1 and ISO 15118, specifically through the Switch platform. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to come back to the side. Okay. So that ultimately brings us to the end of the webinar in terms of what we wanted to talk to you about. Partnerships is really important for us at Switch, because with partnerships you can add value. And what we wanted to do there is demonstrate how we've added value or propose to add value through some key partnerships we have through installers and charge point operators. I don't know, Stuart, if you wanted to add anything else that we spoke about. If not, we can probably open up to some questions.
No, I think that was all very well covered. I mean, I would just reiterate that that's only one small part of the Switch platform. Of course, what we haven't covered here is what you'd expect from a platform in many ways, such as tariff building and monitoring transactions and access control and managing payments, etc. That's all a given as far as we're concerned. We're just showing you here some of the more advanced capabilities. But no, I think it's time for questions.
Great. So we've got 2 questions at the moment, which on the right-hand side. So feel free to add any more as we go along, but we'll start with the top. So our first question is from Pedro. So thank you, Pedro. Are there EVSEs out there already that support OCPP 2.0.1? Are there public EVSEs already installed that are upgradable via software, or hardware has to be always upgraded? Okay, so a 3-part question.
Okay.
All right. Maybe that's since I haven't talked much. Let me just some questions. So to my knowledge, there are no 201 capable charging stations installed yet. We know that there are several companies working on it. We see them at the test events organized by the Open Charge Alliance, and we have the Plug Fests, for example. We ourselves have integrated Joseph, our embedded operating system, specifically already onto 2 AC charging station manufacturers. One is Alfen from the Netherlands, and the other one is Zaptec from Norway. There was also a press release announcement in summer, and we have demonstrated this at the Hubchecked Intercharge Network Conference in Berlin in September this year, where we charged a Porsche Taycan and the Volkswagen ID.5, and demonstrating that Plug and Charge is working. with our operating system installed on these wall boxes. Not just wall box, we had also an AC charging station, the proper station. I don't know what their plans are to bring these stations to market, but I assume sometime early next year. That just to say, we have proven this. It's not just a concept, it's working. Our record so far was integrating that into a charger in 2 weeks, which of course also heavily depends on the commitment from the charging station manufacturers themselves. The way this works is that we imagine Joseph as a microservice-based system whereby we have an ISO 15118 module or service, an OCPP 201 module, and then we interact with the code of the charging station manufacturer through a well-defined API, whereby we use MQTT, which is a well-defined IoT messaging broker protocol. Don't want to get too technical, but it's a very straightforward process. It involves some time, some implementation from the charging station manufacturer, of course, where we help a lot through continuous support until it is finished and proven that it works. So we holding your hand, we're not just giving you the code and say, have fun. And when it comes to upgradability, for Joseph, we need a charging station that has a Linux system running. So microcontrollers are not sufficient, at least for our operating system. Doesn't mean that other manufacturers or suppliers have a microservice-based, microcontroller-based solution. Whether or not they are upgradable depends completely on the existing install base, whether they are over-the-air updatable or not, and if they have the right hardware in place. I can't really talk to that, to be honest. Hope that was a sufficient answer to that one. Then, well, I think I answered the next question already, and Stuart provided a comment. How long does a typical Joseph implementation into an EVSE take? As I said, our record was 2 weeks, but it can also stretch over longer time depending on how much commitment there is from the manufacturers themselves. Then we have 2 other questions. How do you think partnerships as resellers of SARah? Can you elaborate? Maybe that's a question for Stuart.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Andreas, lovely that you've attended our webinar. Thank you for that. If you're thinking specifically in terms of the conversations we've been having for your particular situation, we would expect a charge point manufacturer to be able to offer an end customer the opportunity to connect with the Switch platform. It's really as simple as that. As I said, we don't need to be an exclusive platform connection. We expect that a charge point might have other options. In fact, we know very well that charger OEMs, need to exist to be as open and connectable as possible with any platform. We fully accept that. So we're not looking for an exclusive arrangement, but whereby a charge point manufacturer is able to say to the end customer, here's Switch, connect with Switch, your capabilities will be massively enhanced, then we will find a way to share some of that recurring revenue back to the manufacturer. And that's what we mean by partnership. I won't go into precise details on this call. Maybe the 2 of us could take it offline and we can have that discussion, because I'm pretty sure from your perspective there would be some commercial sensitivities that you'd like to protect in that discussion. But that's fundamentally what we mean by partnership with equipment manufacturers. Hope that answers the question okay.
Okay.
Good. Last question so far. Are there any EVSEs that can be bought with Joseph already for testing or piloting purposes in the US and Canada? So I mentioned we have existing integrations. It's not just these 2 that I just mentioned, but we have an increasingly growing number of customers for Joseph. Can't elaborate on all of them yet, but we are planning to set up a page once we are ready to, or our customers are ready to sell their charging stations with certified charging station manufacturers, and also explain, the functionalities that come with it. For the US and Canada, that very much, I mean, we do have a lot of inquiries actually from the US, quite a lot, all over the place, from Canada to the East Coast, from California in the West Coast to the East Coast. When it comes to US and Canada, it comes to also certification, UL certification, and temperature. How do you say, the range of in which temperature ranges you can deploy these chargers. That is up to the manufacturers, but I can't disclose all the discussions we are having at the moment. So a little bit vague, but we are targeting the UK market, the European market, and the US market, including also the North American market with US and Canada, first and foremost at the moment.
I mean, just to add to that, a lot of the manufacturers that we're working with, they have some quite amazing launch plans of their own based on elevating their capabilities through the embedded Joseph software. And we have to really honor those conversations and remain sort of under NDA, so to speak, until those launch activities take place. We can't make that announcement for those manufacturers. But maybe if you get in touch privately, we can discuss particularly the US and Canada, because we are in quite a few discussions with manufacturers in the US and Canada.
Good. Then next question, is the communication between Sarah and Joseph pure OCPP 2.0.1, or are there extensions in place? Just a note on the wording. We used to call our cloud-based management system Sarah. It's now more of an internal name, so the official name is the Switch platform, for those that might be confused of what Sarah really means. So we are implementing exactly as close as possible to the specification. So far, there are no extensions. However, if there is a good use case brought forward to us by the manufacturer themselves, where they want to include information and make it visible in our platform that is maybe to date not available through the protocol itself, we are of course open to extensions as they make sense. Also if it's a business case for us that we can maybe also deploy this functionality to a wider audience. But again, let's have this discussion in detail later on. So far, I don't see any further questions, but please feel free to jump in now and click this question mark button and pose your question, and I'm happy to answer it in the remaining 10 minutes we have. The recording will be available after probably sometime early next week. The slides as well, if you're interested in those. And anything you want to add, Adam or Stuart?
No, not particularly. I think it's great to be able to speak with everyone today, and it's good that we've got a mix of people on the line as well that falls into our kind of partnership category. We are, as we said, we are actively working with charging station manufacturers today, and if you're not already on the list and need help with OCPP 2.0.1 and 15.11.8, we're here. So just get in contact and we can walk you through how we can work with you and what that means for you. But yeah, feel free to get in contact with us in that sense as well. But no, nothing else for me, Mark. Thank you.
And with regards to the protocol, we have been working on OCPP 2.0.1 exclusively from the very beginning, because that was our vision. Not yet another platform that is OCPP 1.6 capable and thereby very limited, which took a lot of time, obviously, with a rather big team. We're now 25, mostly engineers, working away on that 2.0.1 implementation. And not just that, of course, also the ISO 15.11.8 stack, for which OCPP 2.0.1 has a native integration. So with OCPP 1.6, you don't have that. There is some, backwards compatibility through application guides, but it's not really a great interoperable solution. However, we do realize that there is a need for a support of OCPP 1.6 chargers in the ground. We are not completely ignoring this fact. And there is a certain support for 1.6 chargers for a select number of chargers. If that's of your interest, come speak to us and we can see how we can support you on that as well. And we are already working on the next version of OCPP, by the way. There is a draft currently developed by the Open Charge Alliance for vehicle to home, vehicle to building, vehicle to grid functionality, so anything that is related to bidirectional support, which of course ties into the latest ISO 15118-20 standard. And we have already implemented these latest drafts, and that is also going to be deployed in a test site with the V2G project that we have ongoing with car manufacturers, as Stuart briefly mentioned. That's supposed to be deployed next year. But specifically, vehicle to home is what I believe in vehicle to building, kind of like peak shaving and also energy self-sufficiency for homeowners, especially with peaking prices as we see currently in the market, is going to be the first and foremost the interest for bidirectional charging applications. Because let's face it, buying an electric vehicle is still very expensive. The EV battery itself is taking up around 32% of the costs of a car on average currently. So you want to monetize, you want to get some return on investment from that very expensive battery that is 90% of the day basically idle because you're parked either at home or at your workplace. So why not make use of this battery on wheels, so to say, and use cheap energy, renewable energy when it's available, put it in your car through the charging process, and then make use of that energy once it's expensive and there's less renewable energy available within the range that you feel comfortable. Of course, you don't want to deplete your vehicle completely, your battery, but that's what we're working on to make this whole vehicle to home through to vehicle to grid possible for both DC chargers, but also AC chargers. And we are always at the forefront of innovation. That's basically the DNA of Switch. And we are open to innovative ideas all the time. Good. Let's see. Any other questions?
I think there's one in the comments box, Mark, from Hans Rady regarding V2X AC. Is DSO interface to M3 EVSE as standard?
I don't know what M3 EVSE means. Mode 3, I assume. Is that right, Hans Rady? So when it comes to a DSO, which stands for Distribution System Operator, so basically the grid operator, for that right now we do have an exclusive partnership with Nuvve, that is the California-based V2G pioneer. So we leverage their expertise when it comes to grid operators, both in the US and in various European countries. And the interface between this DSO and our platform or Nuvve's platform is most likely going to be the likes of OpenADR, standing for Open Active Demand Response. That's, as far as I know, kind of like the go-to interface to utility operators or grid operators. I think I hope that answers your question. But let me know if you have further questions. So I see one in the QA section. Oh no, that's the same.
Yeah.
Okay. We have time for one last question if anyone wants to jump in. If not, you know where to reach us. Add us on LinkedIn. You can send me an email as well, mark@switch-ev.com, and let's get in touch and talk. I hope this webinar was very useful and insightful to you. We really hope that we could convey the future-proofness of our platform. It is a game changer for sure, and we are currently at a technological inflection point between legacy protocols that are very limiting and the protocols that enable us to really get rid of charger anxiety, which is a big roadblock for a seamless rollout of EV charging infrastructure. We need to give prospective EV drivers and existing EV drivers the necessary confidence in our charging infrastructure. and that comes with necessary granular data insight and seamlessly vertically integrated solutions. And that's what we're trying to achieve here at Switch. All right, thanks for your time, and also thanks Adam and Stuart and my team in the background, Ben and Sue, for preparing this webinar. And we'll talk to you soon in the next year.
Thanks, everyone.